All right, we're back, and we're going to be doing some arithmetic with vectors. I've kept my variables from the last video just so we can work with them, because we're just going to talk about what happens when we do math with vectors. So let's look at our evens, which is one of the vectors that we set up in the previous video. So there it is, even numbers from 0 to 10. And we can actually, let's just do math with these just like if we were using single numbers. So like if we add 1 to evens, and this might not seem to make sense to like add 1 to a list, but what R does with it is actually pretty intuitive. So if I say evens plus 1, all it's going to do is it's going to go through that whole vector and add 1 to every number in it. And now it's important to remember here, we're not assigning this vector that it's outputting, we're not assigning it back into the evens variable. So if I look at evens, it's still the even numbers. So if I wanted to do something like have a vector for odd numbers, I'd have to assign it and do something like odds is assigned evens plus 1. So now we have odd numbers. And that works with most of our mathematical, our arithmetic operators. So I could say evens squared. And there we go. Or I could say odds divided by 2. And in all these cases, R is returning a new vector, or outputting a new vector that contains the result of performing whatever mathematical operator on every single one of the elements in a vector. Now we can also do arithmetic involving two vectors. So for example, what if I want to let's look at evens and odds again. What if I want to add those two together? Well, I can do that too. And your normal rules of arithmetic apply. So, for example, if I try to take odds and divide it by evens, um, you can see for that first slot in the vector, I get infinity because I tried to take 1 and divide it by 0, and you can't divide by 0. So what R does, if I say 1 divided by 0, we get an infinite value. And sometimes that kind of thing pops up in data where we have like a number that doesn't really kind of messes up our math, because what are we going to do where like we can't do a whole lot with this vector because it's got an infinity in it. So you got to be careful of stuff like that, just like you would if you were doing arithmetic with single numbers. And now, in order for us to multiply or add or divide vectors by each other, they need to have, well, you'd think they need to have the same length. Like if I say, let's make a new vector called short vector, and we'll just make it 10, 20. Now, I can actually multiply, I can actually use this vector with a mismatched length, but only if it divides evenly. So in other words, I can say odds times short vector. And what R is going to do is it's going to, since odds is 6 long, has a length of 6, and short vector only has a length of 2, what R does is it repeats the shorter one as many times as it takes to make it, stretch to cover the length of the longer one. So it's taking one. Well, let's put those side by side. So it's taking 1 times 10, then 3 times 20, then 5 times 10 again, then 7 times 20, then 9 times 10, then 11 times 20. So if I had this works, but if I made one like say like this. So if we do that, because 4 doesn't divide evenly into 6, R has a fit and tells us, well, I can't do this. So in general, you probably want to make, if you're doing operations between vectors, you probably want them to be the same length. Although technically, as long as it's divisible, it'll still work. But I'd say the important things to remember here are, one, you can multiply vectors by other vectors, or not just multiply, but any arithmetic operation that you can also take operations between vectors and a single number. And you need to remember, if you want to when you do this, if you want to save the results, you need to assign them to a variable, and that maybe that's the same variable that it came out of, or maybe it's a new one. But if you don't use the assignment operator to store it somewhere, then all that's going to happen is it's going to print out on screen but not really be remembered by the computer anywhere. All right, stay tuned for the next video. We'll be talking about some more interesting operations that are just for vectors.